Hi, my name is Mark Bartold, and I'm with Bebo Analytics. Today we're going to be going over the middle class jobs presentation, part 2 of 3. I've studied politics and history, economics all my life, and most of it has been through just a hobby, personal interests, and so on, which most people probably don't have. But at any rate, I really enjoyed it, and I've got a 2-year degree, but was unable to continue my education for one reason or another. But I figure I'd present these presentations in order to open my knowledge to other people, and they can take it as they will with it. But I think it's interesting stuff, and I figure I'd try and share it with other people. So policy 6 in my book, I cover international trade and peace. We'll cover international trade on this. International peace is something that's, separate and is very involved. But international trade helps in the peace process to a certain extent. Now, World War II, the U.S. has been known to be the leader of the free world. So trade with the U.S. was critical to rebuild Germany, Japan, and other countries that were destroyed by the World War. Stalin's Russia and many of the Eastern Bloc countries that would later become part of the Soviet Union did not take advantage of the trade with the U.S. And they pretty much fell behind as far as the growth in all aspects of life, really. Once a lot of the Eastern Bloc countries fell, the Soviet Union dismantled itself. There was a lot of cheap labor and a lot of goods to be sold to these Eastern Bloc countries because they had next to nothing. They had bare minimum. China had minor trade, which ultimately, as an agricultural nation, did not need much other than coal for heating. And they were very slow to get back into the trade with the U.S. until the 1970s, when Nixon and Henry Kissinger had made a visit to try and open up China diplomatically as well as for trade. And then in the 1980s, Sam Walmart and a few other companies had gone to China in earnest to tap into the cheap labor. You had hundreds of millions of people to go into plants and to work. And quite honestly, the population of the United States is not as much as the labor force of China today. So we could try and get some of the jobs back to the United States. But the reality is that we don't have enough population to even think about having that type of opportunity. And a lot of that played out in the COVID. After COVID stopped, there was very little amount of people, workforce, to supply the jobs that were open. And it's not just the fast food places either. It's also factory works and many other jobs were left open because of the lack of population to do the actual work. Now, of course, you have the immigration thing, which I had covered in the first part, which pretty much says we need the cheap labor to do the cheap jobs, the jobs that the Americans are refusing to do, as it were. But, there's policies, the Welfare to Work program that Bill Clinton had back back years ago, is another program that the Republicans had pushed on this last 2020s to get welfare to work more stringent. So you have people not necessarily taking advantage of the situation. Of course, some people are in a situation where they can't work for whatever reasons. But there are people that, do get the social programs with very minimal work. And there again, nobody wants to work for $7.25 an hour. It's just too cheap a minimum wage, and I don't know that anyone does at this day and age. It's been over 10 years since it was the minimum wage was increased, and but China has grown so much that even their minimum wage has grown to a point where it is easier to bring jobs back to the United States because of the fact that it is cheaper in some cases to just have the businesses work here instead of build it in China, have it shipped over and then brought in and then still modified in some cases, and then it's just a lot of double work that goes on in that. Whereas with the supply chain issues that COVID brought, that also brought in the fact that, hey, wait a minute, maybe if it costs just a little bit more, it might be better that we build it here as opposed to the risks with China. Now, a lot of countries we do not do trade with, like Cuba, for instance, right? Cuba, because of the 1950s Castro, we don't trade with them. And yet Vietnam, from the 60s and 70s, we do a lot of trade with Vietnam. Even China uses Vietnamese labor lately for their cheap labor because of their population and their workforce getting more and more wage and more benefit. And so it's ironic to me that we trade with Vietnam, but we don't trade with Cuba. But it's these little idiosyncrasies that happens that, trade can be a very complicated process. Now, international trade, it's been decades, right? Since the 80s, Sam Walmart and other companies, they expanded globally, and it became a global trade. Different things were made cheaper in different parts of the world, and it was prioritizing certain things. Now, of course, again, the COVID changed everything. COVID made it, it's like, well, wait a minute, we're going to need to do this regionally as opposed to globally in order to have multi-regional commerce. Now, with different countries that we do not trade with, like North Korea as well, yet we still trade with China as well because of the cheap labor. But the more that we are able to continue giving China the amount of commerce, gives them the ability to have a good economy to build military strength that later on we may have to deal with one day. Not to say that we will, but disarmament of nuclear missiles, that's gone to the wayside as well lately, and it's just a very dangerous world nowadays. Now, World War II, like I started at the beginning of it, we sold scrap metal to Japan, and they in turn built aircraft carriers and airplanes that they used to bomb Pearl Harbor. I mean, it's just one of those deals where it's like, yeah, I mean, even Germany, there was ball bearing factories, there were U.S. factories in Germany, But at the same time, we were basically allowing Hitler to expand only because we did not like Stalin. And then Stalin wound up being our ally only because, our enemy of our enemy is our friend type philosophy, I guess. Because once that was over, once World War II was over, our major generals were wanting to go ahead and go into Russia and take Stalin out before they were to get the nuclear bomb like we had got. And so the threat of having to deal with them later, they wanted to go ahead and go in while we had all our troops over there. But, and that's where Korea came in. In the 50s, we went into Korea. And then the 60s, we went into Vietnam, still trying to keep communism at bay, or that way of thinking at bay. And with China, they have such a large population, they have to have control. And keeping Chinese labor working is one way to keep China stable. But their strength has gotten to the point where they're going to overseat the United States and we're going to be in trouble. So, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, when you think about, changing hands on who's the leader of the world, I just don't see that China is a good avenue because of the fact that we have to, eventually, like, we are in a bubble, which I'll discuss later. We are just in a snow globe, and we can't just pollute the planet. But we're going to cover that later in this program. All right, enough about all that. International trade, like NAFTA, it exported all the jobs, but we are getting some of the jobs back only because COVID really put an eye on the supply chain situation. But in the end, we still need more labor. We would need more immigration, like I discussed in the first part. So, but international trade's important because of the fact of resources, which again I'll get into in a later segment here. Infrastructure. Policy 9 in my book, Middle Class Jobs. Local, state, and federal dollars must work together to plan and construct much-needed infrastructure projects. Bridges have been collapsing almost every month. You could almost say, well, there's a school shooting every month. Well, there's also a bridge falling every month. Army Corps of Engineers are a key force that was used many years ago for our construction needs as far as for national construction. New Orleans with the bioducts. In Florida, there was the canals that they were actually trying to drain the lake that you can see from space, Lake Okeechobee. They were trying to drain the lake when they built these canals, and but it never did happen, and much too much water. And they built dams, they built bridges, interstate highways. And, the Army Corps of Engineers was very useful in its day. Nowadays, I'm not sure exactly what they do. I think private industry may have stepped in and took over all those projects. And In some cases, it's just not, they're not moving along. Whereas the Army Corps of Engineers, you get the project going, boom, it's going to be done. I mean, it's just going to be done because it's, they're budgeted out to do it. And they do it without any cost overruns of any magnitude, and without any shareholders or any failures of the business owner going bankrupt or fraud or any of that. The Army Corps of Engineers, to me, is an area in which we could expand and create a lot of jobs. The military in general, to me, we use technology for a lot of things. Remote control airplanes, are doing a lot. I mean, we don't have to risk pilots so much, but you don't need that many pilots even still yet. When you're flying planes that can do so many things now, as opposed to 10,000 foot soldiers. You can use a couple airplanes and do the same job. But there are other jobs in the Army that can be used. The manpower, secure the border. I mean, seriously, And speaking of which, like the wall, right? The wall is a defensive thing. And so, the military budget, it would be easy to toss in a wall. And I don't know why they didn't do that. But at any rate, there's still the Canadian border, too. Going to build a wall there, too? Or I don't know. Anyway, it can be done just as a speed bump, as it were, for people coming into the country illegally. But those are other issues that, of course, I addressed in the first thing. Immigration policy should be the number one thing that should be solved. And I think it's a bipartisan issue. And we need the cheap labor. We need to be able to process people. We need to be able to bring people in for work visas or what have you, in order for us to build and rebuild our infrastructure. And I look at the Empire State Building and I think, wow, that is something. Record time, I think I brought it up in the last video as well. Record time building of a building, and it's still standing very strong. But that's what we need. We need to build more upward with places for people to live. We need the capabilities to get more people in housing. Our homeless thing is very, very sad. It's like third world country stuff going on. I'm telling you. We're working our way to be a third world country. I don't know if you could see it, but if you look at it in those terms, we're headed to a third world country status. The way we're going. I mean, we got Wall Street, and that's the only reason that we don't. And we print our own money. But if we had a coherent plan to use the money that's printed to provide jobs, to provide opportunities, and to safeguard our bridges, our waterways too, and to also the wind, and solar projects, and fresh water. Fresh water has been a real issue, and Florida is going to be in trouble. I'll tell you right now, they're going to be in trouble. Salt water infiltration into freshwater. I mean, they have to stop building down there. People need to stop going to Florida, I'm telling you. Appalachian Trail and the park systems were built under FDR. Those were the shovel-ready jobs. Shovel-ready job, when Obama was trying to do the shovel-ready jobs, he found out it was like, well, yeah, he did provide a lot of aid. I think it was over $700 billion. But how many shovels, how many people were actually employed by it? I'm not so sure. And a lot of those projects were to be brand new projects, not projects that were ongoing that needed completing, um, and in which case, all 50 states were struggling with their budgets after the um, financial crisis of 2008. There are more technical jobs than just grabbing a shovel. And there's more people that have more two-year degrees like I have, and other type capabilities that using a shovel to get stuff done. I mean, it was an old terminology, and we need to reinvent what the new technology word is for applying jobs. And I think middle class jobs pretty much says it. If you can create middle class jobs, which Joe Biden had been talking about, and with his Biden economics idea, but I'm not exactly sure what the plan is. I don't necessarily see anything different than, everything's got to go through Congress anyway, right? And so, yeah, what are those middle class jobs that he's talking about? I don't know. I've got a 3-part series going over this information, and I don't see any of it in the where's the let's build bridges thing. I mean, there's talk about doing it, but there's no money to do it. It requires tax money. You have to have taxes in order to build stuff. You have to have tax money in order to have any of the middle class job creation that I'm talking about. So where's the tax money? That's what I want to see. I want to see where's the actual plans, where's the policies. The reason I created the book was basically from the '08 crisis, seeing how Obama and the Republicans were running around not knowing what to do. They were bailing out Wall Street. They were bailing out banks. I mean, how do you bail out a bank and expect to also grow the economy without any plan, an infrastructure plan that, was like, just figure it out. When saving the state's budgets would have been the first priority, and the second priority would have been, hey, let's do some infrastructure in earnest that needs to be done by using the state, local, and federal dollars that are needed in order to do that. Enough of that. Let's look at climate change. Now, climate change is policy 10 in my book. Now, of course, I have these different chapters of, they're broken into policies. And, one policy is not better than the other in my thing. I think all of them need to be implemented only because we need everything. A failed state, doesn't have anything, and we're working towards having nothing. And the only way we can stop that from happening is to build going forward and replacing what's broken. Now, the mid-1800s, the Industrial Revolution was beginning, and as the years went by, most of the major cities around the world were fighting smog back in the 1800s. regulations started forming early on to restrict areas from being used for coal burning and electric grids. Oil and gas started to replace residential heat sources to limit the pollution. China has had pollution problems in their country because of limited to no restrictions on coal and the placement of the factories. Water systems and groundwater in China are quickly being contaminated. Ground contamination is also a concern because of all the chemicals that are being dumped in the rivers and the overuse of the crops and chemicals that are sprayed for against bugs, all the things that the United States are not doing because of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Environmental Protection Agency rules and regulations. They're not doing that in China. And that's another reason why China has been used for all the manufacturing, because we don't want to pollute our country, so they're polluting their country instead. And it's going to come back to bite them. It really is. They're going to have real bad issues. But they have a large population, and they're going to have some serious issue. I'm telling you. The population increase there, and much like, let's say, like I was saying about Florida, they're running out of fresh water. And I think China has a lot of fresh water because of the mountain regions and everything else, and they're able to get fresh water on a regular. But at some point, the lower end of China, the tail end of those rivers and lakes are not going to be able to sustain living conditions that are acceptable. Solar panels have been built in record numbers in Texas, even though the politics has been going against the use of solar and wind in Texas. The grids have been built, and it strengthened the production of the storage of the energy as well. And it has prevented a lot of major blackouts that they were having before. Energy efficient homes and commercial buildings will help reduce the fuel resources needed for heat and air. A lot of that's been going on. A lot of people, I get mail all the time about, hey, we'll give you a break on energy efficient home analysis, and it's still a little bit of money though to have that done, and over time, people will have to put solar panels on their roofs, and it's been beneficial in Arizona and Texas. And those are large population states. I mean, Arizona is becoming a large population state. But I haven't really heard anything about Florida having solar panels in any numbers. And, new construction, many entrepreneurs and skilled jobs can be created by the transformation in architecture and design using new technologies for building 22nd, 23rd, and 24th century buildings, transportation systems, and multi-planet expansion. Now think about it to me, like the China and Dubai, they're already in the 22nd century. And that's why I'm saying 22nd, 23rd, 24th, is because we need to look further. We need to be saying, hey, in the 40s and 50s, they'd have all these things like, oh yeah, in the year 2000, we're going to have all these different things space vehicles, flying machines, and everything else. In 2000, yeah, I mean, we were trying to figure out if all the computers were going to crash or not, and we stopped going to the moon. When if we would have continued to do the moon thing and put a base on the moon, then it would have been made more sense only in relation to the fact that if a meteor hits the planet, boom, we're all dead, right? But if there's a moon population, then chances are it's not going to hit the moon and the Earth. So there's still, we have a multi-planet system with the moon. So, I mean, there's all the talk about Mars, but the moon is very close. And that's what, I know we're talking about climate change here. Like I said, we are a snow globe. Resources will run out. There's not a never-ending amount of oil in the ground. Saudi Arabia. Why is there such a big push to Saudi Arabia to be investing in other things? I mean, ExxonMobil, for instance, right? ExxonMobil is like, yeah, we don't want to do the wind. We don't want to do solar. We're just going to pump oil. And yeah, at some point, there's probably enough oil where ExxonMobil will be fine. They just do oil and that's it. With Saudi Arabia, the oil's running out. Okay, they're going to run out of oil. They're tapped into certain oil in the ground, but they've been pumping the oil for so long. Because I remember years ago, some experts had said that Saudi Arabia would run out of oil. And just like some of the oil drilling in Texas, a lot of them ran out. They dried up oil wells. So, right now Texas is still pumps oil, but for the most part, they do the refining of the oil. It's coming down from Canada, and then it's processed and then sent to China to build our stuff. The dirty oil that we probably don't burn here because of environmental, but they're burning that oil in China so that they could build the products. It seems cumbersome, but the resources will run out. Think of us as a bag of potato chips. The potato chips will run out. I mean, we're eating ourselves to the point. Because see, you can grow food, okay? You need the water to water it, which we got rain and everything else. So food, no problem. But the other resources like oil and battery, the battery vehicles that we're building and everything else, at some point, of course, technology, we can expand, we can do different things to compensate for different things because we always try and create something else. But some of the materials that are needed for all these battery things are very limited, and so there's a certain point in which they're just going to be able to go so far, and then that's it, But wind and sun is infinite, and oil will run out, but wind, as long as the planet's turning, right? Sun, as long as the sun is out, right, which is always there, we're not going to run out of sun. We're not going to run out of wind. So, as far as water, well, I mean, the salt filtration systems and water treatment plants, These are all things that need to be built. It's major projects. Again, Army Corps engineer, federal dollars, to help with the water treatments. I mean, let's face it too, right? You got bottled water, and you know, different water systems that supply the water for the bottled water that everybody drinks nowadays. It's no longer, it's being taken from one area and just distributed everywhere. And so those certain areas where that water is being taken is running out. They're depleting water systems to put bottled water that's being distributed everywhere. And so you have oceans, tap into the oceans. These companies need to be earmarking, much like, let's say, oil, right? Same thing. Oil companies have refineries to refine the oil. But the refineries, they seem like they don't build them. They count on the government to build them for them. And then they do stock buybacks. It doesn't make any sense. There should be some kind of regulation that they need to build their own, It's just like saying, okay, I have a store, I want to have another store, but I don't want to pay for the other store, so I want the federal government to buy the store for me so that I could do business there. I mean, come on, like even these big sports arenas, a lot of it's tax money, but a lot of it is like Sim City stuff of like, do you want culture? I mean, how much money can you make on a opera house? That doesn't make sense for someone to build an opera house, and can they ever get the money back? Probably not. So part of it is sort of the, the common good of man to expand their knowledge beyond writing, arithmetic, and reading. You got culture. What kind of a culture do you want? Do you want to live in the 1800s? Or do you want to live in the 22nd century? What do you want? But that's getting off topic of what climate change. Climate change, for the most part, is a problem that deals with resource usage and how we use it. Now, new city development policy number 1. Okay, I hate to use Detroit and the surrounding areas as much as I do as an example of a major city that has fallen from grace. But it is what it is, It just became an earmark. Now, I believe Detroit is coming back, and GM and Ford and all them. There used to be car shows in Detroit every year, and I think they started to bring those back too. But going to China, much glitzier, much it became a situation where they were going to China instead. But now Detroit, I believe, is starting to bring back those car shows. And, but yeah, working on new city development. New Orleans had its tragic flooding, so the rebuild of the city could have been done differently, because I believe they should have went inland. Because like once they got hit by that hurricane that destroyed the, basically the whole city. I mean, large major portion of that population moved to Houston, Texas, and that's where a lot of people had moved, but they moved to other parts of the country as well. And I believe it made a political change too. Like the Houston area became a lot more Democratic, and Atlanta also. But they went to different parts of the country because their homes were gone. You know, I mean, they had to live somewhere. People have to live somewhere. You know, and they could have brought the riverboats to go further inland, and just had a gateway to more drier, higher land, and they could have rebuilt New Orleans, and made it architecturally like a New Orleans city. You know, they could have made a better city out of it, if they would have used that. And the amount of jobs that would have been created, and a lot of the people that were displaced could have come back, you know, and because especially with all the work, the jobs to create the new city. To me, it would have been easy to do. You know, they could have reworked the New Orleans area, and they could have had the riverboats start further inland. I mean, the Mississippi River, you know, it starts all the way in Chicago, you know, and goes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So, I mean, you can have, you know, riverboats go the whole from Chicago to, you know, the Gulf if you wanted. So, for New Orleans, to me, it would have been easy to just go 10 miles inland, build there, you're done. You know, safety, don't have to worry about, you know, a flooding out, as it were. I mean, a lot of people refer to it as like having a city inside a bathtub, you know. I mean, the dikes broke, and I don't know if they can break again or not. I know they tried to solidify it, but Florida, like I said before, resources there are getting, you know, like I said, I don't even know if they're big on solar panels down there, you know. California, Arizona, these are all areas that are running low on resources, and as far as fresh water in particular. But, you know, having a different area to build cities, or providing those cities with the water filtration systems, the desaltation, using the ocean water to get the supply of fresh water. Those areas need to work on getting those done. You know, population booms that are destroying these ecosystems are not using the energy efficiently. You need sustainable communities. We need to devise, you know, I mean, even China does not have, they've built many, many cities, major cities. They've built holding millions of people, but they're not energy efficient cities, other than the trains that might show up to each of these cities, you know, the high-speed rails that they got and everything else. Other than that, they were not built with solar panels or windmills or, you know, anything that made any logical sense. And you know, like the Mississippi River, like I said before. Now, the Mississippi River will run a little low sometimes, you know. But, I mean, you can do some dredging. You can do other things. But it's also a major water source where, you know, you can tap into that to get the water needed for bottled water and so on. And also for supplying a new city. You know, you could build a whole brand new city somewhere. You know, I mean, you got St. Louis on the Missouri River, I think. But at any rate, there is Tornado Alley. You don't want to build a major city where the tornadoes are. But surely there's a place where they could start a whole new city and create millions of jobs. You know, there's Dubai. There's the Line. And Saudi Arabia has the Line. They just started building. And that's an energy efficient place there that they're building. Saudi Arabia is the first one that I've seen that, you know, I thought was encouraging to see, of all the weird places. But again, they're looking to expand their wealth and provide I guess, displacement of their population, really, because they're really having to move people from other areas to bring them in. And they have to bring in people from outside. I mean, it's not just Saudi Arabia people building. They bring in people from around the world. Dubai is a good example, too. Of cities, it was total desert, And within 30 years, they built over 100 skyscrapers. They built islands with multi-million-dollar homes. And it's just unreal. Like, look what they did in 30 years. What have we done in the last 30 years, right? We built, what? Trade One Center? I mean, it just, yeah. I mean, we had twin towers. Now we got one tower, I mean, that's just a reference in itself of us going backwards, But, there's designs. People have different designs on how to build buildings with wind technology to capture the wind through, where cities sometimes are very windy and drafty. They can capture that and have turbines turn by wind into the energy to supply the building. You got solar panels that you can be put on parts of the building for solar collection of electricity as well. But those are costly, but it's becoming cheaper and cheaper for that type of technology. I mean, SimCity New Cities is the most efficient, to do efficient way possible. Designers, in the local area, there's a lot of building that's, they're putting houses in the weirdest places that, I'm thinking it's like someone's messing up somewhere because it's just not suitable. It's the wrong place to put a house, or, there's just too much not planning going on. Now, if you could plan out and get the most efficient type cities available, which you already have China and Dubai on certain structures, but to actually have the most energy efficient way possible to get and low income housing. We need low income housing on a large scale, and to have solar panels on them so that they're energy efficient, so that you don't have $100 electric bill for someone that can't even, they were homeless not that long ago. It's just you want to be able to have self-sufficient type housing, solar paneled and everything. I mean, the federal government has to do it. I mean, there's just no getting around it. But think of the millions of jobs that you can be created and building this type of program. I think it's much needed. Now, of course, you don't want people to be laying around at the house, Oh, we built this house so you can lay around, 7 days a week. No, they're going to have to be workers, and they're going to have to work. There's no question about it. They can't be on welfare, per se. In my opinion, because you want to be able to put people in the right position. They have to work, Now, is it unfair for welfare people? Maybe. And there are people that need better facilities for themselves, and to work your way forward, you have to have the best possible outcome by having the best situation available in order to get out of the situation of repetition of someone being on welfare, raising people to be on welfare, to be on welfare, to be on welfare. I mean, you have to give people a chance to work their way out of welfare. And, you can redo some of the older homes, but work and education need to work hand in hand to try and get people out of welfare. I think it's the best way. And this is why I did the Middle Class Jobs book, because I feel like there's plenty of jobs. Everybody should be working. Unemployment rate to right now is 3.7 where I'm doing this video. But, it could go up to 5%. It could be 2%. It should be 0%. There should be no reason for it. But the unemployment rate does not count for people that are on welfare, not people that are on, permanently out of work. And so a lot of retired people could come out of retirement and help work and help teach, like I said before, the moon is right there. Let's, populate the moon a little bit so that we do have a 2-planet solution so that the human race is not destroyed by some rogue meteor that hits us and destroys us. I mean, it can happen. And, it makes sense on so many levels to just do it on the moon. You got to have a space mask and a spacesuit anyway on Mars. So what's the difference between Mars and the moon? The moon's much closer, and you can blast off from the moon, a lot easier than the atmosphere. And so as far as us having to harness some materials that we're running low on the planet, we can get off of asteroids or whatever, we should have never stopped going to the moon. We should have continued that. We'd already have a space base there. There's space stations that we can have in the atmosphere, space cities. That too, that the planet gets hit, whatever, that the space station would still be flying around it. You'd still have people alive, people that can try and figure out what to do, to see, how bad was it, Of course, a lot of times it's centuries before, you could ever go back to the planet after something is catastrophic. But maybe it's not as catastrophic. Maybe it is only 10-year wait, But the whole process, like there's still water on the ground down there. There's still, the chances are there's still going to be water on the surface that, you'd want to be able to tap into. But, of course, you have the systems that you build over time, being a space type race. I believe it makes sense to start thinking along those terms because, it's a numbers game. Now, it could take 10,000 years before we get hit by a meteor, right? So why are we worried about it now? But, why not? Why in the world without the opportunity that we could go ahead and have a multi-year planet with the moon and survive? But there again, it gears up for people to say, hey, now we can blow ourselves up because we got the people on the space station. I mean, we have to stop destroying ourselves. We need to start working together and try and save the resources that we have. I mean, try and make resources like wind and sun. Look, you can grow crops, right? You got the wind. I mean, you got the sun. You get the water, which we got plenty of water, you would think, right? But, even I think that you could run out of the oceans too in time, right? It would take centuries, but it could happen, right? Especially if you start to tap into that as a source. But the reusable, water filtration systems, using the wastewater recycled back into drinking water again, or at least processing of some kind of water to wash your car with, right? So, yes, there's plenty of middle-class jobs. We have so many things. We got, when I was growing up, you didn't have as much stuff and you dreamed more, There was no Facebook, there was no, internet even. And, there was just dream about different stuff and the different things that, that I dreamed about and the things that other people probably dreamed about are not happening. There is no dreaming going on. Um, you know, I mean, yeah, there's the Mars thing, you know, but I mean, Mars is so far away. I mean, even that seems unmanageable. I think they're rushing to get there, but what's going to be there is that, you know, much like some disasters that have been happening where people go into water and they sink, they die. There's going to be a lot of death for no reason necessarily. I mean, we need to expand ourselves, but I think the moon is the most critical one where we should, we can practice and get more people to understand how to construct things, I mean, like welders and everything else to build things. I mean, look at all the jobs, right? The welders, the carpenters, there's plenty. Now, the accountability, as usual, is everything. Every policy should have accountability. And the Government Accounting Office and the Congressional Budget Office, GAO and the CBO, they'll process anything that you give them, and you give them a problem and they'll solve it. It's just a bunch of accountants and sitting around. Hey, what can I work on? I mean, they're there. They're ready to go. So you just get the best way to get things done. You want to balance budgets, go to them, see how it would be done. Figure out a tax system. Boom, you're done. I mean, seriously, what's fair, right? Let's get fair. You want to balance budget? All right, let's balance the budget right now. Let's stop messing around. Most states have balanced budgets. They it's a requirement that they have to balance the budget. So we should require that as well. What's the best way to do it? And of course, I mean, the military-industrial complex. I mean, look, if we could save $100 billion a year in our military and not expand so much, adding more and more and more, but have where we could save $100 billion a year on it. That's $1 trillion in 10 years. We could use that $100 billion and get, let's say, 1 million more military personnel to help with the engineering, right? So, get the accountants involved. Get them to balance the budgets. There's talk about getting rid of the IRS. I mean, seriously, we need tax money to pay for the stuff. It's just so silly. And you want to stop the fraud. You want to make sure people are paying their share, as it were. But accountability on the projects, all these things have to be, I mean, you have chief financial officers for companies and everything else. Yeah, that's what we need to have for. That's what we need to have for the country, and I don't think we have one. I'm going to have to research that because, in reality, who is the chief financial officer of the United States? Is it the Treasury? I mean, it's a good question, and it's funny how I'm just thinking about it. Anyway, I'll have to get back to you on that. So middle-class jobs create a stable country as well as a stable society. People laying around watching TV all day is not a good look for a society. People that are willing to go out and help with baseball or, like coach baseball or football, people that help with music, put a play on to show, to entertain. Of course, there's movies to sit around on the couch and watch TV all day. But sustainable systems must be developed and implemented so we can survive without destroying the planet. Some say Mars is inhabited before, it was inhabited before the atmosphere collapsed. Is that a goal we are shooting for, to collapse our atmosphere and have a wasteland like Mars is? Think about it. Thank you for your time. The next video will be the third part of the three-part series of middle class jobs over education system. K through 12, trade schools, community college, four-year degrees, masters and doctorates will be covered. Education is, some people say, oh, forget about the college debt stuff. Our common good, just like trying to keep oil prices down, is education. The common good of being able to say, yeah, we don't want any doctors. We don't want you to get a college education, so we don't want you to have debt. How much does it cost to be a doctor? You got to be a millionaire, you would think, right? I'll have to look it up to see how much it costs to be a doctor. How much does it take? Come on, people. We need doctors, and they practice. And if they don't practice enough, just like the moon, right? We had to reinvent going back to the moon because nobody was left that went to the moon the last time we went to the moon. So, we don't want to reinvent doctors, right? To be a doctor. So, now doctorates degrees are more than just we got physics, if we're going to build stuff in space, we're going to need a lot of really smart people. And if we don't have a basis, and it's not necessarily, it's like, well, only rich people can be space engineers. Come on. So Donald Trump is going to be our space engineer. And he'd probably say, I can do it, right? But is he going to be able to do it? You got a lot of people that grow up from poor through the ranks, went to college and became something. And, we need those people. We need everybody to be whoever's smart enough. You still have to be smart enough to get the grades. You just got to be smart enough to get to where you can get to these type levels so that we can, I can't afford, to be an engineer. Come on. I had two uncles that were engineers. They got very low, it didn't cost them much of anything because they were at the GI Bill or whatever. They had scholarship or something. So they were able to get their engineering degrees, but it wasn't because they didn't become engineers because it was like, oh, I got free money. They still have to earn it by actually doing the work. They had to do the, work to be an engineer. They couldn't be a dummy. It's like, I got an engineering degree. You just have to, Now, not everyone's college material. My parents said I wasn't, and I guess they were kind of right. I only got a 2-year degree. But the main focus of, getting people into different areas, they got to be able to be capable enough to get the certain work done. We need smart people in certain areas, but we also need the trade schools. We need someone that can weld. We need someone that's good at mechanic work. I'm lousy as a mechanic. I'm all thumbs when it comes to stuff like that, right? But there are people that are very mechanically inclined, and we need people to build stuff. We need welders. We need carpenters. I knew a guy that could just did a really good job finishing tables. It was just so good at furniture, any kind. He was just very good at it. His family, had been in the furniture industry. I'd never seen anyone do such a fabulous work, and I can't do it, I had the boss tell me, it's like, oh, I want you to do what that guy did. It's like, I can't. I just flat out told him I can't. I'm not that skilled. And you need skilled labor. You need skilled labor. You need the truck drivers. You need, you need the people, the plumbers, electricians, all these people. I don't even know where a lot of these skilled job trade schools are. I mean, I don't even know how these people get trained that way locally. And so, I believe there should be more tapping into it. And of course, I mean, drones and electronics, um, video, uh, production work, uh, and I'm just talking and talking, I guess. Anyway, there's a lot to be done, and I'm excited. The next part is going to be over education. And thank you for your time.